years ago, before Harbor Island was built, this area was marshland. And it was actually used quite frequently by the Duwamish tribe, the Duwamish people, Native American tribe who lived throughout this Seattle area. As many of you know, when it comes to marshlands, they may not be the most attractive, but they are wildly abundant with different forms of life. And so these people were really big hunters and foragers and gatherers, and so it was a very, very important area to them. Now in 1909, Harbor Island was built. That was built by the Army Corps of Engineers who built Harbor Island. It was meant to be used for economic purposes and for the growth of the city, as you'll see it currently is. Now what we're pulling up on right now is one of the largest proprietors of this island. It's called Vigor Shipyards. Vigor Shipyards, and one of the... That's him honking at us. Feel free to wave. A lot of great guys working over here. I have a lot of respect for him. What we're pulling up on right now, and a look about Captain Charlie always gives us a great view of some of the inner workings here. These are called dry docks, right? Dry docks are used when a ship needs to be pulled up out of the water, whether it be for repairs, regular maintenance, sometimes just something as simple as painting. Now what I'll tell you about these dry docks, you see how it almost forms a U shape, right? Our one on the left hand side of this first dry dock will have a 12 painted on it. Now these are called, these are the walls. These are basically the walls of the dry dock, and what they do is they'll fill them with water. They're hollow walls. They'll fill them with water and submerge them down into the water, at which point these large vessels will be towed in by tugboats. And once the vessel's in place, they'll drain that water from the walls, and the dry dock will rise back into place, effectively pulling the boat safely out of the water, so that they're able to access and work on the lower hulls of these ships without damaging them or having to go underwater. As you'll see this naval vessel in front of us with the 101 at the red bottom there, it is safely pulled out. It is set up top there, and they're doing some maintenance on it. Most likely, about every 2 years, the Coast Guard requires that larger vessels be checked in order to keep them safe and keep the people on board safe. It's likely what this ship is doing, having some repairs done as well. Just to the left of that, we see another little white vessel poking through. It's got that W that some of you might recognize right there on the front of the ship. That is, in fact, the University of Washington ship. That's a research vessel. So what they'll do is they'll take students out into waters, do all different types of experiments and deep sea measures, looking at all different types of things when it comes to minerals and sustenance and bottom creatures that live out there in the oceans. And what it does is it's going to prepare those students who are doing these semesters at sea for their jobs after school. So this vessel will go out, take students out, they'll do their research, they'll bring them back, and they'll share the stories with us. Keep cruising along here. Now Rainier once again is showing off very beautifully for us today. It's off on our right-hand side, just behind those cranes there. This next dock that we're pulling up on, coming up on our right-hand side, you'll see at the very front of it's got a giant blue spool. So it's like a giant spool of thread. This is Rainier Petroleum. Rainier Petroleum is a fueling dock. So this is actually where all of the Argosy ships will go to fuel as well. I was over here with one of our vessels just a few nights ago, getting all fueled up. This also services different types of fishing lines. It'll do the Washington State ferries. It'll take care of privately owned ships. They'll even do cruise ships. But what you'll notice about this area is that it's not extremely large. There are definitely ships larger. So what happens when those larger ships need fuel, they'll do is they'll send in barges specifically designed to carry fuel up those barges. The tugboats will tow those barges out to the larger vessels, and they'll fuel on that spot, as opposed to attempting to bring them into this little tiny dock. That's all relative, obviously. We fit just fine. I'm talking about a few different types of boats. I don't want anybody to be too confused. We are going to see some great examples. I'll point them out to you. That first being, I talked about a barge. And we're going to see a barge up on our right-hand side here. It's got the word Crowley sprawled across the side of it. Flat boat, black boat. This is a great example of a barge. One of the interesting facts about barges is that they actually don't have their own propulsion systems. So essentially, they're giant paperweights in the water, right? They can carry a lot. They often do carry a lot, but they can't move themselves. So what they do is they're towed by tugboats, which is another boat that I mentioned. You're going to see a great example of one, a Crowley tugboat, just off of its starboard side. And it's that red and white boat that we see. There's some interesting features about these boats. If you be constantly aware anytime you're in the water. The reason why they have this type of view is because of the way that tugboats execute their movements. The tugboats are extremely strong, and extremely fast and efficient. And they actually have a propulsion system that almost looks like giant egg beaters under the boat. And what's unique is they're not set up at the back of the boat, which you're probably used to seeing, but directly in the center. Now, the reason for this is because tugboats towing these large vessels with a lot of weight need to be able to move in any direction at any speed at any given time, drop of a hat. So they're really, really incredible vessels. In fact, when a lot of container ships used to come in from the Pacific Ocean, all these tugboats used to race out to be the first to meet the boat and attempt to get the bid on the job. If they met out there and they got the job, they start painting their boats in these really unique colors so that captains could recognize that they could go jetting out there to meet these other boats to the job. Now, of course, this started a lot of rivalries and skylines were developed for a while. Tugboat races are the largest tugboat races in the world. We've since been canceled for safety reasons. People really weren't competitive in regards to those races, but they were really unique and really fun to see.
I'm glad I did go.
Charlie's going to maneuver us into what we know as the
I've never been anything like this before. This is cool.
the longest waterway. We're going to take a look at some other large vessels and some other large structures. Here you can see these massive cranes. Some of them are white.
I'd say.
These cranes are meant to load container ships. And container ships aren't that old of a concept. In fact, the first container ship company was started by the name of Malcolm McLean. Malcolm McLean in the 50s was a truck driver. He drove around the country delivering goods all over to all different types of businesses. And one day he decided, why don't we make this more efficient? Why don't somebody kind of universalize this process? Found a way to do this safer, more efficiently, more effectively, and quicker. And so he sold his truck, sold his company, and he started his on a boat. He started his own container ship company. And people were watching. They were curious to see how this would go. And he was really on something. Within 15 years, he actually had the largest container ship company in the entire world. At which point, they really started looking at universalizing the process and the size of these containers. Why can't the container loaded onto a truck also be loaded onto a train and then onto a boat at any port all throughout the world? So these cranes were built in order to do so. They're massive, massive. They're actually built over in China. What's interesting about these cranes is they're so large that the boats that they're going to be put on can't go through the Panama Canal. So it takes them 2 years to get here. These cranes cost about $10 million a piece. So they're huge pieces, but they do allow us to service all these massive boats. Now, one of these massive boats you'll see has blocked out our sun. We're coming along the side of it now. It's got the letters CMACGM printed across. This boat is a great example of container ship, and I'll tell you why. There's 3 different sizes of container ships, as we know it. You've got Panamax, right? Panamax is your smaller of the 3. What Panamax denotes is that it was built to fit through the original dimensions of the Panama Canal. So that's what it means by Panamax. Then you have Post Panamax, which is the secondary size, which is actually going to be what this boat behind us is. So yes, in fact, if they do get bigger, the Seaspan Zambezi down there is also a great example of a Post Panamax. Now these medium-sized Post Panamax simply means that once the Panama Canal was renovated to be made wider and larger, these vessels are able to cross through that waterway under those dimensions. Now, the largest size, as we know it, is called Super Post Panamax. These boats are absolutely massive. They're huge vessels. And what do we mean by Super Post Panamax is that they are too large at any point to go through the Panama Canal. So these cranes that are loading these vessels are actually loaded onto those vessels that are too large to get through the Panama Canal. It's quite a mouthful. So I want to point out something before we get too far off our starboard right-hand side. If you look, it's about at our 4:35 clock as we're going. We see a brick building with an American flag floating on top. There's a couple heads with crowns, green heads with crowns looking right at us. Do we all know what that is? That is, in fact, Starbucks. That is the corporate headquarters and home of Starbucks Coffee. Now, sure enough, that started here in Seattle, as you may know. In fact, the original Starbucks location is in the Pike Place Market, not far from where we are today. When we pull back in, it'll be just north of us.
Yeah, that's when I went to.
I'll point you there.
See that?
See? You go to the
that?
original location.
I
now.
brought you
We all know
Starbucks from the
Starbucks
original
now.
one.
Over 60 countries worldwide.
Right from there.
Over 23,000 locations. And most of our locations, as we know here in Seattle, are all over the place. When you walk through the city, you see them everywhere. Does anybody have a guess within the 5-mile radius of Seattle, including some of these waterways here, how many locations of Starbucks that we have? 30. 30 is a good guess. 84 or 30. Actually, you have about 120.
Wow.
120 plus. They're almost being built every day. Now, of course, none of those are in the water. We don't have any floating Starbucks yet, but it is an innovative company. So who knows? Maybe one day you'll be able to pull your boat up and order your Frappuccino on the water.
So we got to go to the fields too.
So now we're passing Starbucks. We're getting into what we call the South Downtown area, also known as SoDo for short, which is where you're going to find your sports complexes. Now, for those of you who are sports fans, you're going to enjoy this little blurb of our tour. Now, there's two stadiums. The first one that we're going to see off our right-hand side is gray. It's got that amazing, very complex structure on top with the crisscross beams. That is Safeco Field. That is home of the Seattle Mariners. In fact, the Seattle Mariners will be playing the Boston Red Sox, I believe, tonight in that stadium. We're hosting the Red Sox in town. It's game 2 of the series tonight. I'm sure some of you may have tickets to that game. Highly recommend Safeco Field. It is one of the most beautiful ballparks in America. Always ranked in the top of the university. One interesting fact about it is that the roof itself is very unique. The stadium was built with that roof. It cost $76 million just for the roof. The reason why is because it is unique to any other stadium retractable roof. It can be closed or open within about 15 minutes, but it never fully closes. It doesn't create a dome atmosphere like in other cities that have retractable roofs. The reason why other cities make it to become a dome is because it's supposed to protect you from the sun as well as the rain. We don't have a problem with that out here too much. It doesn't get too hot. So it stays an open air stadium even when that roof closes. A lot of people in Seattle call it our midlife crisis because we bought an extremely expensive drop top, but we absolutely love it. It was a great investment. Just past that off on the right hand side, you'll see another sports complex. It's got those big white arcing beams on top. You can almost read the letters, I'm sure, on that roof side. That is CenturyLink Field. The CenturyLink Field is, of course, home first and foremost to the Seattle Sounders. I see that because they are the reigning champions of Major League Soccer, the MLS. In fact, they're such a successful team that since their introduction, their inauguration of the team, they have not missed the playoffs once. They currently hold the highest attendance of any team in Major League Soccer. Many of you who are American football fans also know it as the Seattle Seahawks. Sounds like we have some Seahawks fans out there, right on. There's also a gorgeous stadium, but one of the best features about it is it was actually designed to be extremely, extremely loud. Right? The architects were instructed to design it and build it so that all of the sounds of the stadium would funnel down directly on top of the field. I'll tell you a quick little story about how successful they were with that. In 2011, a lot of people thought the Seahawks just really don't deserve to be in the playoffs. They won their division with a 7-9 record. They got a home game against the New Orleans Saints. How does that work? Well, it turns out they had every right to be there. They hosted that game. The Saints came to town. They fought hard. In the third quarter, the Seahawks started to pull away.
That's cool.
One of the biggest plays of that game that many people remember was Marshawn Lynch, also known as Beast Mode, running for a 67-yard score while breaking 9 different tackles from 9 different tacklers for the New Orleans Saints. As he crashed through the end zone. The sound was so loud in the stadium. People were cheering and stomping and screaming so loud. But at the University of Washington, a few miles away, seismologists recorded a 2.1 magnitude earthquake, with the epicenter being CenturyLink Field.
Get out of here.
So clearly that architect made his money and did it right when he designed that stadium. That being said, we've got a few other things to talk about before we get back to the dock here, but feel free to take some pictures. We're cruising out of the waterway, getting back into Elliott Bay here. We're going to look to the skyline. One of the first buildings you're going to see along the skyline is this kind of pencil-shaped building, right, with the triangle on top. Light tan or beige in color. Now this is the Smith Tower. And what's interesting about the Smith Tower is this, at one point, was the tallest building in Seattle.
Yeah.
Now, not only was it the tallest building in Seattle, it was the tallest building in the United States outside of New York City when it was built. So that tells you a little bit about our progress over the past 100 or so years. Now Smith Tower is absolutely gorgeous, and one unique feature about this is that pencil top, that triangle on top, it's actually an apartment. There is in fact a family of 4 that lives there. And I don't know what the rent is like, but whatever they're paying, it is not good enough. They must have some of the best views in all of Seattle. Now we'll talk about what was the tallest building in Seattle and move on to what is the tallest building in Seattle, which you'll notice just to the side. It's a large black building with a concave side on it. That's the Columbia Tower. I don't like to talk too much about my personal experiences, but aside from Argosy cruises, that has to be one of my favorite destinations to go to. The reason why is you being out on our vessel today, you're going to get the whale's eye view of Seattle, which is extremely unique, and you're unable to make it up any other way. Going up there, you get the bird's eye view. The reason why I say that, it being the tallest building in Seattle, at the very top, it has a viewing room. And this observation deck has an entire 360-degree view of Seattle. It's absolutely breathtaking. Now, it does cost money. It's about $18 to go up to the top. But the nice thing is you can get a stamp. And what I always do, I'll bring folks up in the morning, get some great photos. If there's any clouds, we'll go enjoy the day and head back in the evening and maybe see some sunset. Some photos of that. But it's truly incredible to see how small Seattle is from that island. As we cruise along, the last thing I want to talk about here is Dock 54. That is the Coleman docks. You see the wall that's there.